This is one of the toughest talks. When you're talking about vaccines, you are messing with religion. And one of the things that's so frustrating is the difference between what actual science says, what information you're getting from your standard doctor, and how this completely insane procedure is being forced on us. I mean, I came from the 60s where forced medical procedures would not have flown well. Okay, forced medical procedures without informed consent is what we're dealing with. But if it saves us all, would everyone be okay if I forced you to take a vitamin? No, you can't have employment unless you take vitamin C. You can't have employment unless, or your kids no education unless your children get vitamins. Do you have a challenge with that? Yeah, even though the vitamins are completely non-toxic. So let's look at this. We're going to go through the ignorance. For one, this is what the people in power are saying. Vaccines are safe and effective. We'll look into that. Mercury has been removed from the vaccines. And I love this, the most ignorant guy, I mean, if it was legal to hunt, okay, well, he's head of infectious disease at a hospital, and he says, well, the mercury in vaccines is less dangerous than mercury in a fish sandwich. We're going to actually go over the studies on that. The thimerosal in vaccines has been used as a preservative, is safe. Your unvaccinated child is going to put my unvaccinated child in danger, and vaccines don't cause autism. It's interesting to know that there's over 80 studies that show it does. So let's go into it. Well, first, do we have the healthiest population of kids in the world, or the sickest? The sickest, literally. I mean, you're talking 1 in 2 of a chronic illness or disease. If we transferred this data to water buffaloes, and I said we have this herd of water buffaloes where 1 in 2 of their offspring have a chronic illness or disease, would we go in and maybe check the environmental cause, or we would just say it's genetic, just better diagnosed? No. 1 in 45 autism rates. Now, the tough is, if we compare ourselves to the rest of the world, infant mortality, we used to be 12th when I was a kid. We're now 77th, and it's where our kids are getting exponentially ill. Autism, unless you're buried in the sand, because there's some people, oh, it's just better diagnosed, and that's not true. Okay, because otherwise we'd see a bunch of 60, 70-year-old autistic people, particularly at a 1 in 45. However, we only have about 8 more years to where it's 1 in 2. Now, autism is a huge problem with the brain, but it's also a huge problem with employment, since 94% can't hold down a job. So if we had 1 in 45 adults with autism, we would see that apparent in our economy. Now, if you haven't seen the movie Vaxxed, I recommend it. This was a study done back in 2002 or 2004. And what they did is they decided to close the door on science, just say, hey, look, we're going to do a study and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine does not cause autism. Now, they didn't test them all. They just tested a small group, okay, and they didn't do a placebo-controlled trial. The problem is the numbers didn't really add up. So if you go into doing a study and your goal is to prove that vaccines don't cause autism, but it actually shows about a 340% increase in autism, you know what you say? No! Let's crunch the numbers, let's hide it. Okay, so William Thompson, actually one of the senior scientists, he was involved in the study, and he says, look, I got to come forward, we need whistleblower status. We lied. Okay, now this should have been on every news station everywhere, and it wasn't. Now, if you're pro-science, and if you think science is accurate, do we have any data that this schedule is safe for every human being? If we took 100 children and gave each 100 of them the same drug, would we have the same effect in 100 kids?
No.
No, of course not. It'd be impossible. What if we did 69 doses of 16 different vaccines? in everybody. Does it make sense that this might have some negative effect on the body? But now also, what are the animal studies? Who chooses this? Well, let's see how we got into this. For one, how do they decide that a vaccine is actually effective? It's interesting because you can't, shoot a bunch of people with a flu vaccine and, dump a bucket of influenza over them and see which ones get sick, right? So what they use is a thing called antibodies. And this is an old theory. It's not true, but it's an old theory at a Journal of Virology. And this is the role of antibodies controlling viral diseases from experiments. Now, it's interesting, demonstrating that antibodies play little or no role in controlling viral infections. While they are crucial in resolving bacterial infections, such a view has acquired dogmatic status over the years and is commonly found in immunologic textbook and other scientific publications. So this means every time they're measuring an antibody for viral infections, it's not accurate. Let's take it a little further. Did you know back in 1968 they started to do studies on patients with agammaglobulinemia? Now these are patients that couldn't make antibodies. So the theory is that if you have a load of antibodies towards a disease, that you're protected, and if you don't have a lot of antibodies, you're more vulnerable. Problem is they took this group of kids who had a genetic defect. They couldn't make antibodies. And here's the wrench in the works. They contracted measles in the normal fashion, showed the usual sequence of symptoms and signs, and were subsequently immune, even though no measles antibodies were detected in their serum. So maybe the immune system is a little bit more complex. Have we gone into this? No, because there's no other way to test to see if a vaccine is actually working. This is what I deal with. Okay, we get a vaccine damaged kid 1, 2, at least a week from everywhere around the planet. And we're talking ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, full-blown autism. And this is what a destroyed gut looks like. Now, when continually I'll get people say, well, vaccines don't cause autism. Okay, and then I got these two girls, okay, they come from Arizona, and they were both totally nonverbal autistics. Luckily, they're starting to talk, but they went through a 9-year court battle to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt in court that the DPT shot caused their autism. So when you hear people in authority, they're safe and effective, and they don't cause autism, that's wrong. That's wrong. So they knew this back in the 80s. In fact, so many people were getting damaged by vaccines, they had to do a protection thing. Now, granted, you got two choices, okay? We're all, beings with hopefully common sense. We have a product that's damaging so many people that the companies making the product are going bankrupt from the lawsuits. You can do a couple of things. One, A, make the product safer, or B, give the companies liability or immunity from lawsuits. So even though the product is dangerous and hurting people, you can't sue the manufacturers. And then, let's really get in bed with the manufacturers. Let's not even bill them for the cases of this. Let's add a tax per shot. That's what they did. So the National Childhood Vaccine Act, even though kids were getting damaged, they passed this act to completely eliminate any product liability. So this means that they could just produce whatever they want, add whatever they want, and you cannot sue the doctor, you cannot sue the company. Okay, this is beyond amazing that this would have passed. Now what they did, they put a check and balance in there. Okay, now remember, this is back in 1986 when we still had exemptions. Now, they put in the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, VAERS. And and this is how the system was going to work, because they obviously thought that, well, if we give them liability-free and unlimited access to a market, they might get out of hand. Okay, so you had to, and this is back then, be provided a written vaccine benefit and risk information before the vaccination takes place. That's when it was first done in 1986. I know what you're thinking. We're in California. Risk and benefit before it takes place. Why would they do that when it's forced? We don't even have informed consent anymore in California. You understand that? If you're in the military, no informed consent. If you work at a hospital, no informed consent. So that's been taken away. I know that's been around since the Nuremberg trials. Just flush it. Okay, they're supposed to keep a permanent record of all vaccines, manufacturer's name and lot number, record serious health problems and put it in the patient's permanent record, and make a report to the Federal Vaccine Adverse Event Report System involving injuries, deaths. Here's the problem. Between 1 and 10% of all of the injuries are reported. Can anyone read that backwards? Between 90 and 99% are not reported. Now, you might think this is just a money grab and pile of crap, but let's look at it. Back in 1986, 23 doses of 7 vaccines. Of course, back in 1986, we also had exemptions. So people could opt out for them, opt into it, take half, change the schedule, do whatever you want, okay? Of course, in 1997, 33 doses of 9 vaccines was added. Now, 2016, 69 doses of 16 vaccines. Why the increase? Was there's a big cry from the public, save us, our kids are sick? No, and so now we're looking at this. Our kids are suffering. There is an environmental cause. So is there evidence? And right now you can tell that there's so many people looking at their computers on YouTube. They're fuming, but they protected us from disease. They're safe. They're just a genetic susceptible population. It's not in the literature. Let's look at the literature. Okay, the cost of the vaccines went from $80 per child to $3,000. Okay, and we're looking at, I mean, if you don't have any kids, this is what parents are paying, or your health insurance. And drug companies won't be liable for any injuries, deaths under the in the new law. So now this is what the vaccine companies are paying out. Okay, now remember, let's go back, because I know it was 2 slides ago, and it's hard to have that long of a memory, but no one gets that. Okay, I'm going to start doing Bible humor. Okay, so when you look at this, remember, 90 to 99% of all the adverse events are not reported. So you could multiply this by factors, okay? We're talking $114 million was paid out, okay, in vaccine court settlements. 1,000% increase for the flu shot, 300% increase for hepatitis B, 75% for the DPT shot. I mean, when you look at this, millions and millions of dollars is paid out. And this is in 1 year. Don't worry, I know what you're thinking. My God, if the vaccine companies had to fork this out, they might go out of business. No, it's our tax dollars, so it's okay. This is an attorney, and I'm just looking in there, trying to find what a pro-vaccine person would do, because I'm not anti-vaccine, I'm anti-stupid. This is stupid. This one law firm, they've collected over $200 million in the past 3 years for their clients, and I doubt if they're the only firm. Now, you understand that we have anti-discrimination laws in this country. Okay, this is not North Korea. Well, kinda, in some respects. Okay, so you could have full-blown HIV infection and you can go to school. You could have chlamydia, tuberculosis, go to school. You could have full-blown hepatitis B virus. You could be an IV sexually active drug-using prostitute and go to school and be okay. But if you don't have a vaccine, you're discriminated against. Okay, anyone find that like a little weird? Okay, so there's no laws to protect your freedom of choice. There's no informed consent. Now, if they're safe and effective, like remember, I was going to force everyone in here to take a vitamin, okay? You know, and you're not going with that. So let's look at the safety studies. Okay, what does Webster's dictionary say? Free from harm or risk, safe. Now, the problem is you're going to see multiple vaccine safety studies, because if you have an idea with what a safety study should be, we should have a placebo, right? And a placebo is supposed to be an innocuous substance given. So this means, you take a therapy group, a placebo group, and I don't know, maybe a control group, and you don't do anything to them, and then follow them for a bit. Well, let's look at it. Human Experimental Toxicology Journal, safety studies have not been conducted to determine the safety or efficacy, if it's even good, for administering multiple vaccine doses in a variety of combinations recommended by the CDC guideline. And this is not just an American psychosis. A buddy and patient from Dubai sent me this record for his kids. They're going through the same stuff. It's not the same volume that we have, but it's the same psychosis. I mean, there's no safety studies that show, and just like, how would you do a safety study with 69 doses of 16 different vaccines over 18 years? How would you do that? Okay, now this was the last part of the study, and this is going to be a shocker. It turned out that if you give more vaccines to a younger, smaller baby, that you have more negative responses than if you give less vaccines to an older, bigger baby. I know. Yeah, it's like, really? You had to do a study? Come on. Okay, so let's look at the mercury. Okay, because remember, the vaccine experts, and this is one of the reasons I put this on there, is because as vaccine experts are saying, no, ain't the mercury in the shots, because mercury's been taken out of the shots, and so even though mercury is neurotoxic, it can't be one of the causes of the autism epidemic. Have you heard that? Raise your hand if you've heard that. Okay, good. Let's cut through that crap. Okay. According to the fact sheet, thimerosal acknowledges, this is the sheet from Eli Lilly, in utero in children can cause mild to severe mental retardation and mild to severe gross motor impairment. That's on the package insert. Most seasonal flu shots have 25 micrograms of thimerosal. For this, the kid needs to be 500 pounds, 550 pounds. Now, you might say, well, how do they get away with that? Do you want to know how they did it? It's not one shot. What they do is they average that 25 micrograms over a year, and they say, see, it's safe. Okay, thimerosal is a neurotoxin. It's so toxic, if you put it on your skin, it'd be illegal. However, the CDC recommends that pregnant women and newborn children get influenza vaccines. That seems odd. Now, they go back, okay? Now, in 1999, granted that was a long time ago, we're talking like 18 years, but and this is the delusion that mercury is all removed from the vaccines. The amount of mercury in the childhood vaccine schedule recommended by the CDC exceeded all national and global maximum safety limits. So the American Academy of Pediatrics, the United States Public Health Service, called for immediate removal of thimerosal from all vaccines. Sounds good, right? They're getting behind something that makes sense. And so by 2003, the vaccine manufacturers had begun to react. Okay, good, it only took them 4 years. However, in April, the CDC recommended that pregnant women and young children get the flu vaccine. Now, even though it was never tested on pregnant animals, well, that doesn't make any sense if you read the package insert. Okay, now this caused widespread confusion, no kidding, because mercury had been removed from most of the childhood vaccines except for the flu shots. Now, the problem is, since they're added flu shots, and they also added a couple of more shots since 1999, the amount of mercury added to the immunization schedule outweighed the amount of mercury taken out. So we're looking at tetanus shot, flu shots. So the FDA and the CDC have increased the possible maximum childhood exposure to mercury from vaccines to twice the level that was triggered in 1999. Okay, now, federal statements regarding thimerosal. Okay, after a 3-year investigation, congressional report by the Staff Subcommittee on Human Rights and Wellness, Committee on Government Reform, Mercury in Medicine. Let's just read this, okay? Because if the doctor recommends a flu shot to you, okay, or a flu shot to your daughter or granddaughter or pregnant wife, thimerosal used as a preservative in vaccines is likely related to the autism epidemic. This epidemic, in all probability, may have been prevented or curtailed had the FDA not been asleep at the switch regarding the lack of safety data regarding injected thimerosal and the sharp rise in infant exposure to this known neurotoxin. In our public health agencies, failure to act is indicative of institutional malfeasance and self-protection and misplaced protectionism of the pharmaceutical industry. Wow. Why isn't this on Channel 4 or Channel 7? Why aren't people just up in arms? I mean, this is mind-boggling. We go in, and these are all the people that form the statement, but FDA criminal negligence is in not instituting a Class 1 recall of all vaccines administered to infants containing thimerosal in July 1999 and again in 2000. We have determined that your above allegation that thimerosal is being used in order to increase the manufacturer's profit margins represents a potential conflict of interest issue which may be criminal in nature. This was 16 years ago. Okay, this has never been followed up. Why? Because the pharmaceutical industry has tons of money. Now, again, if you're based in science, if you think you're scientific based and you think that the vaccines are based in science and the doctor is making scientific recommendations and the doctor is actually reviewing this, have any animal studies been? Well, yes, there have been 2 of them. Although this one was printed and then pulled because it indicated that vaccines were not good. So they took Laurel Hudson, University of Pittsburgh, took a group of small monkeys, okay, rhesus monkeys, and they macaque monkeys, and they injected them with the scaled down version because they're smaller than humans, and the same schedule. So 12 hours, bam, hepatitis B. Okay, first month, bam, you get the DPT, you know, all the whole schedule. I think up through the first year. And what they found, significant differences in the GI tissue, gastrointestinal tissue, gene expression profiles between the vaccinated and unvaccinated animals. Wow, so they actually vaccinated one group and didn't vaccinate another group. What this study doesn't show, okay, and this is amazing because one of my patients is a pediatrician and he bought the vaccines for him. They said that they couldn't eat regular monkey chow. They lost all social behavior activity. Biologic changes and altered behaviors did occur in the vaccinated monkey group, which resembled autism spectrum disorder. No such symptoms were present in the unvaccinated group. Then they dissected the brains and they found damage. Now, here's another one. Okay, and this is where head of infectious disease at a hospital. This guy, I know there's a special place in hell for him. I know it. Even if you don't believe in the concept, this son of a bitch needs to go there. What they did is they gave monkeys a shot and checked the blood levels for mercury. They fed them a tuna sandwich or a mercury-filled sandwich and checked the blood levels. They were amazed that the blood levels of the thimerosal-exposed monkeys went down, so there was no blood mercury levels found at around 7 days, versus 24 days for the ones that ate the mercury. So what can you say? If you don't read any more of this study, you can say, wow, that's amazing. So it looks like the vaccine is safer. However, the large difference in blood mercury half-life compared to the brain half-life for the thimerosal-exposed monkeys indicates that blood mercury may not be a good indicator for risk of adverse events on the brain, particularly under the conditions of rapidly changing blood levels as those observed after the vaccinations. Now, data from the present study supported the prediction that although little accumulation of mercury occurs in the blood over time, with repeated vaccinations, accumulation of mercury in the brain of infants will occur. I'm sorry, repeated vaccinations, accumulation of mercury in the brain will occur. Brain is not a good place for mercury. Okay, it's neurotoxic. It's not good for you. Thus, the conclusion regarding the safety of thimerosal drawn from the blood mercury clearance data in infants receiving the vaccine may not be valid, given the significantly slower half-life of blood mercury in the brain as observed. I mean, and I actually heard them mention the study, and he only mentioned the first part that said, hey, it shows that it clears out of the blood quicker. Is that purposely ignorant or purposely evil? I don't know, man. If you're an expert in humans, you should really want to take care of them. Okay, then you look at it. More Institute of Medicine, recent publications, direct link to thimerosal containing vaccines and a significant rise in children being diagnosed with autism. Institute of Medicine review of safety studies found that there is not sufficient evidence to render an opinion on the relationship of ethyl mercury exposure and development disorders in children. So you look at this and yes, there's a link, no there isn't. Yes, there's a link, no there isn't. Isn't there enough to like study it? Okay, then you look. This approach is difficult to understand. Okay, I love this. A recently published second review appears to abandon the earlier recommendation as well as backed away from the American Academy of Pediatrics goal. This approach is difficult to understand given our current limited knowledge of the toxicokinetics and the developmental neurotoxicity of thimerosal, a compound that has been and will be continued to be injected in millions of newborns. Millions of newborns. They say it's toxic. We know studies that it knows it's toxic. We know it's been doubled in the schedule, but we're not going to study it. I mean, look at the Journal of Neuroscience. Vaccines alter fetal brain development, increase in seizure susceptibility, promote autism spectrum disorders. These are not Hobunk journals. Let's look at the National Institute of Health, PubMed. Anyone want to go there? You know, for the idiots that say, oh, vaccines aren't associated with autism, how about we look at an article that's titled, A Positive Association Found Between Autism Prevalence and Childhood Vaccination Uptake Across the U.S. Population. Would that be of value to get a headline? Well, it takes a lot to motivate you, but I would think it would be enough, okay? A positive and statistically significant relationship was found. The higher the portion of children receiving recommended vaccines, the higher prevalence of autism spectrum disorder. Neither parental behavior nor access to care affected the results, since vaccination proportions were not significantly related to any other disability or number of pediatricians in the United States. The results suggest that although mercury has been removed from many of the vaccines, other culprits may link vaccines to autism. Other culprits may link vaccines to autism. Other culprits may link vaccines to autism. Can anyone read? Okay? Any pediatrician can read. I mean, shouldn't this be a value? There should be criminal liability for this. Further study into the relationships between vaccines and autism is warranted. No kidding. Now, when you look at the Journal of Toxicology, increased rates of autism. You look at the Journal of Public Health, autistic disorders prevalent, directly related to vaccines. Then you look at this study. They're comparing the DPT shot or pertussis and rubella vaccines. It's interesting. They're just comparing these two, not the 6 doses of the DPT. Okay? They're just comparing these two, and what they found was that yes, there's a causal relationship's a big deal. It means it actually caused it. Okay? Now, it'll cause anaphylaxis, acute encephalitis, which is swelling of the brain, hypotonic, which can't move anything, hyporesponsiveness, and periods of inconsolable crying and screaming. I don't know. Shot anyone? Okay. Now, if you get the rubella vaccine, of course, it can cause acute and chronic arthritis in women. Now, this is interesting. They found insufficient evidence to say it's causal or not, presence or absence of a causal relationship. So there's not enough data in this study to say, yeah, for sure it caused it except for this stuff, or maybe it didn't. We just don't know. And they're looking at chronic neuralgia, meningitis, rash, Guillain-Barré, which is paralysis, diabetes, learning disabilities, peripheral neuropathies. I mean, shouldn't that should like maybe make us check into it. Here's another analysis of the DPT and chronic nervous system dysfunction, a new analysis. Why do they need a new analysis? Because they know that the DPT causes neurologic damage. This is one of the ones that was wiping out the vaccine companies. So they said, yes, it can cause neurologic damage in 3 possible scenarios. Okay, the committee posted 3 possible scenarios where acute neurologic illness that will follow the DPT might be related to chronic nervous system dysfunction. Now, then they go through to say, look, we're not supporting, one scenario over another. It's just they're there. Okay, this is what's happening because we're seeing a big rise in neurologic problems. One scenario, DPT administration might cause a serious acute neurologic illness and subsequent chronic nervous system dysfunction in children who might otherwise not have experienced either an acute neurologic illness or chronic nervous system dysfunction in the absence of DPT. That means perfectly healthy kid we inject, they got damage. Okay, like the 2 kids from Arizona. Now here's another scenario. DPT might trigger an immediate or approximate cause, but nevertheless still a cause, of an acute neurologic illness in subsequent chronic nervous system dysfunction in children with an underlying brain disorder or metabolic abnormality. So if you have something, see, if I inject you, you would never have gotten a problem, but because your body is defective, okay, you got the illness. Honest to goodness. Okay, that's why they're here in metabolic defect and things. Here's the third scenario. So 1, perfectly healthy kid gets neurologic damage from the neurotoxins in the DPT. Second one, you had a defective body. You could have responded well, but you didn't. You got a neurologic illness. Third one, the DPT might cause an acute neurologic illness in children with underlying brain or metabolic abnormalities that would themselves eventually have led to a chronic nervous system dysfunction, even in the absence of an acute neurologic illness. So you were already messed up, this just made it apparent. Okay, now, time and time again, if you know anything about epidemiologic studies, case studies, how different studies are made, you know for a fact that epidemiologic studies, which is what all the ignorant science-based pro-vaccine people use, they use epidemiologic studies. The problem is epidemiologic studies are not designed to find the cause. They're designed to break out and perform new studies so you can be more specific. There's a good book of the National Institute of Health, Review of the MMR Vaccine and Autism Executive Summary. And I like this. Now, this is the findings. Findings from unpublished studies which were shared with committees publicly and through personal communications, which are in the process of being submitted for publication, seem to provide additional evidence of no association between measles, mumps, and rubella and autism spectrum disorder, although the findings still need to be peer-reviewed, published, and subject to scrutiny by a broader scientific community. Okay, so now if you're ignorant, we can stop there. Anyone want to be educated? Let's read paragraph 2. I know, the doctors that do this stuff, they don't read paragraph 2. Although these epidemiologic studies do not support an association at a population level, it is important to recognize that the inherent methodological limitations of such studies in establishing a causality, the highlighted portion of the bottom. Furthermore, the rarity of individual autism spectrum disorders and the difficulty in determining their exact onset, and therefore the temporal relationship between onset and vaccination, makes certain epidemiologic study designs impractical. So you might say, well, why didn't we do a vaccinated with unvaccinated? Wouldn't you? I would think that'd be cool. Okay, here's the, because they go through and they start thinking, well, this is some of the problems. And this is what they're recommending. See, doing the epidemiologic study that came to a conclusion that there wasn't a problem, they're saying, look, the study's not even designed to assess causality. So this is what they want. And this actually makes sense. So there are some really good scientists out there who are being, just lambasted and destroyed. In its discussion of recommendations related specifically to the measles, mumps, and rubella and the autism spectrum question, the committee identified more general concerns that it could not adequately or appropriately address in this report. These include deficiencies in the available information on the risks and benefits of vaccines, inadequate discussion on the ethics of providing information regarding the risk and benefits of vaccines, the role of public input into vaccine advisory committees, and inadequate clinical provider information on vaccine safety or the vaccine adverse event reporting system. Do you know who recommends the vaccines? Do you know how it went from 23 to 33 to 69? It's called the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. These are 97% of the people on these panels work for the vaccine industry. They're not doing any studies. Summary, and you look at this. The Immunization Safety Review Committee concludes that the evidence favors a rejection of a causal relationship between the MMR and the autism spectrum. However, this conclusion doesn't exclude that the possibility that the MMR could contribute to the autism spectrum disorder in a small number of children, because the epidemiologic evidence lacks the precision to assess rare occurrences of the response for the MMR vaccine leading to autism, and the proposed biologic models linking MMR to the autism spectrum disorder, although far from established, are nevertheless not disproved. Okay, so in English it means the study wasn't designed to show causality. We don't know if it does or not. We should do some further studies. Okay, does that kind of make sense? Here's the problem. Do bullets kill people?
Yes.
Occasionally, but not all the time.
Right.
Does smoking cause lung cancer?
Yes, but not all the time.
Not all the time. Why? Because 60% of people that get lung cancer never smoked. Okay, I've shot a gun a bunch of times. I haven't hit one person. Yet. I'm really thinking about this. You know, I see that little, whoops, there it is. Yeah, yet. Let's look at some of the studies. Okay, the RotaShield, 1999. Now, diarrhea is devastating, particularly in developing nations. Why would anyone have diarrhea? Toxic food, toxic water? Maybe a good response to the body? Yeah, here's the challenge. If you are dehydrated, you can have heart attacks and you can die. So you're talking thousands of kids a year die from diarrhea. Okay, but now do you go in there and say, hey man, we got to fix the infrastructure. We got to get wells, clean the water, get the food. No, we're going to develop a vaccine that can stop this rotavirus. Okay, now here's the tough part. The more subsequent infections that you get from this virus, you actually develop a better immunity. Okay, where it doesn't end up bothering you. So now the RotaShield was the first vaccine. It was put on the market, killed a bunch of kids, and took off the market. So they had to still do it. So the next one, the RotaTech, went in. And if you look at it, you think, wow, 71,000 infants, 3 placebo-controlled trials, serious adverse events were very similar in the placebo group. Okay, anyone want to see what the placebo group and the RotaTech group took? The RotaTech group took the RotaTech, the DPAT, the IPV, the hepatitis B, the Hib, and the PCV vaccines. That was the treatment group. What did the placebo group take? The DPAP, IPV, the Hib, the hepatitis B, and the PVC vaccines. Problem?
Too similar.
No, man, you're thinking there's no control group. Huh? I mean, I was talking to some patients today, and a couple of them, I mean, we're talking like engineers, doctors and stuff. What do you think a placebo is? Oh, placebo is an innocuous substance given to somebody to study the effects of it. Okay. Yeah, not now. They're active placebos. When you look at this, let's go over transmission. Okay, now this is the Lancet. So the vaccine that was approved is RotaTech. This is what all the kids get. Okay, even this poor kid in Dubai is getting it now. Okay, so what happens? Are vaccinated kids protected, or are they at risk of unvaccinated kids? Or is it the other way around? The unvaccinated are at risk of the vaccinated? Well, here goes. Viral shedding and risk of transmission. Transmission of vaccine virus strains from vaccinated children to unvaccinated children. Contacts harbors the potential for herd immunity, but also the risk of vaccine-derived diseases in immune-compromised contacts. So if you get the vaccine, your kid does, you better be careful that he's not around anyone for 14 days. Because he's infective, and if he poops in his diaper, you change the diaper, you can give it to the entire family. Let's look at hepatitis B vaccine. Okay, what they're doing again, if you look at the data, 10 double-blind studies. Okay, and this is why when ignorant people say, well, you know, there's always double-blind studies. No, they're not. They compare vaccinated with unvaccinated. That's not it. What about neuropsychiatric disorders associated with vaccines? Little school back east, Yale School of Medicine, Pennsylvania State. What they found was that vaccines are associated with anorexia nervosa, obsessive compulsive disorders, tic disorders, attention deficit disorders, major depression, bipolar disorders. This is the vaccines. Polio. Okay, what's the number one fear? God, if you stop vaccinating, polio will come back. Yeah, have you heard that? Okay, let's look. Let's look, why not? Okay, here's the National Polio Surveillance Program. Okay, now this is in India. What we're looking at, let's go way back to 1996. Now, acute flaccid paralysis, these are cases caused by the vaccine. They're not wild polio. Wild polio back then had how many confirmed wild cases of polio? Can anyone see the 0 at the top up there? So 1996, India was polio-free. No wild cases of polio, but 1,000 cases caused by the shot. So let's follow this program up, and you're seeing wild confirmed cases go up and down, maximum of 1,900, low of 0. You know, pretty much stable, you know, those are wild cases. The acute cases of flaccid paralysis, now these are kids who are never going to be normal again, caused by the shot, continually rises to a top of 60,922. So yeah, polio is now wiped out in India. They're polio free, but we have 60,000 kids that will never be normal because of the shot. Now, outbreaks in polio, China. Now this is from the Oxford Journals, Medicine, Journal of Infectious Diseases. Outbreaks of polio in China, Egypt, Haiti, Madagascar, Philippines are caused by the circulating vaccine-derived polio viruses. They demonstrate that these revertant strains are fully transmissible and pose significant results. Why? Why are we still vaccinated for polio? If you knew the actual facts that 95% of everyone that got polio never had a problem, never had even a symptom, 4 to 8% had a mild cold for 2 weeks, and we're talking 0.1% had serious death and permanent paralysis. So if you read that backwards, 99.9% of the people that got polio had no problems. So why are we doing this? Here's the challenge though. Worldwide, 70-80% of children are receiving 3 doses of the DPT and the oral polio in their first year of life. Yes, I understand oral polio is illegal to give out in America because it causes polio. I understand that. Okay, so in 1984, they knew that this was a problem. So let's kind of like not tell anyone. Any possible doubts, whether or not well-founded, about the safety of the polio vaccine cannot be allowed to exist. Strike it from the record. In view of the need to assure that the vaccine will continue to be used to the maximum extent. So, if you think there's a problem, don't even look into it. Yeah, maybe it'll just go away. Okay, now here's the problem. We're going to see massive rises in epidemics. And when you look at these ignorant sites, they say, well, of course, there's more disease rates in the vaccinated because more people are vaccinated. And vaccines aren't 100% effective. So we'll see higher disease rates in the vaccinated. Oh, honest to God. Well, now we're coming up into deep trouble. When immunity wanes, vaccination has far more limited impact on the average number of cases. High levels of vaccination, greater than 80%, we're already out there worldwide, and moderate levels of waning immunity, greater than 30 years, large-scale epidemic cycles can be induced. This is where the fear factor is coming. Well, we can actually look at the stats to see if our population really is sicker or really is healthier. We do have the lowest infectious disease rates. Is that from the vaccines or from sanitation? We do have the worst mortality rate of the developing nations. That means kids not making it their first year. Maternal mortality, moms being killed. Okay, we have one of the highest of all industrialized nations. In fact, maternal mortality rate more than doubled between 1990 and 2013. Why is that? Half of the nation's pregnant women, nearly 2 million women, were either vaccinated with a Tdap during pregnancy or influenza before or during the pregnancy. A lot received both. What do we know about pregnancy and the ingredients of the flu shot? Is it good for your body or bad?
Bad.
Bad, but it's recommended. There's no even studies on pregnant animals. Richard Horton, editor-in-chief of The Lancet. Okay, there's real scientists out there, there's real doctors out there, and when they see the data that I'm reading to you, they see the huge chasm between absolutely completely ignorant doctors or evil doctors. They know the facts and they're just not going to tell you, or they're so stupid they're not going to look up the data. They're just looking at this mounting rise of vaccine or damaged kids from some environmental toxin. You can't have a genetic epidemic. But when 1 in 2 kids has a chronic illness or disease, do you think there's an environmental cause? There is nothing else other than an environmental cause. It doesn't just happen where half of the population has a chronic illness or disease. In any society, ever. A lot of published research is in fact unreliable at best, if not completely false. He's right. There's some scientist out there, like the data I'm reading, comparing a vaccinated group with a vaccinated group. Is that a true placebo-controlled trial?
No.
No. What about recommending a flu shot when there hasn't even been pregnant animal studies? No. This is insane. No, and we have the data that says the 69 doses of 16 different vaccines aren't good. Okay, it's never been studied. Editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine. It's no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I've reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as editor-in-chief. The psychosis. So if you're going to check into it, if you're going to actually do the research, if you're going to read the data, and you decide that you're not going to get it, tough luck. You're forced to get these vaccines. Now, there is still medical exemptions in California, but by God, why are we allowing this? Just no. And we have a physician's responsibility handout, okay, where they actually take responsibility for the shots. This is not. If you choose to get your children vaccinated, by God, read this. Is there any other safer thing that you can do to protect the child? Like vitamins, nutrition, healthy nerve supply, effective sleep? All of these things that should be studied? When you look at this, what's the first step? Vaccines. We know they're neurotoxic. For God's sake, at least wait. But shouldn't we have an independent committee to say, yes, the risk of disease, of polio, that 0.1% will have permanent impairment. So we shouldn't vaccinate the 99.9% that would never have had a problem. Do you understand that? Let's take each disease. Chickenpox. How dangerous is that? Okay, they used to have chickenpox parties. Measles. Check out the Brady Bunch measles episode. Antibiotics. Avoid those unless it's life-threatening. Medication. For God's sake, find out why you're taking it. Surgery. That's a good one. Environmental toxin, processed foods, and sedentary lifestyle. I mean, this is it. When we put up these Just 5 keys. The nervous system controls and coordinates everything: regular exercise, proper nutrition, sufficient rest, and prayer and meditation. This is one of the things that if you get a friend that's taken multiple prescriptions, and they're freaked out. Are they sick or healthy?
Sick.
Sick. Nobody takes a ton of drugs and is healthy. Here's a question you can ask them, and this is weird because I get the same answer 100% of the time. Okay, you're taking a bunch of drugs. You have no access to pharmaceuticals. You and me would go out on a desert island. We only have fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, fish, sleep in the outside, beautiful, wonderful, but you have no access to pharmaceuticals. Does your health improve or decline? Improve. 100% of the people say improve. 100%. Okay, you live healthy. You eat healthy food. You take care of your body. You sleep good. And you have no access to vaccines. Does your health improve or decline? We don't know. We've never done a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study. All we know is that the population that's multiple vaccinated now is not going to outlive their parents. Okay, they're the sickest generation the world's ever seen. Now, we got a new website, drjohnbergman.com. The disease database is really cool. You don't need a membership. You don't need anything. You just need to get on this friggin' thing and share the information. You know how much it cost? Free. Nothing. No. Okay, now I put references up here that some pertain to the talk, some don't. But they're references, and this is how I do my research. I hear a statement, look up the references, 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 and keep going, okay? So review these. If you don't agree with the references and data that I have, I mean, you know, come up with data that's supportive of why this plague is hitting us. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, now, any questions? Yes, sir.
Are there any extra steps to be taken, like to reverse any toxicity that the vaccines have introduced in children who already have vaccines? Like any other extra steps other than what you've mentioned, healthy lifestyle?
Yeah, there's a huge number of things you could do to detoxify a kid. And it really depends on how damaged they are. Okay, you got to heal the gut because that's the gut is just destroyed in these kids. And then you got to heal the brain, and that's going to be omega-3s. There's a number of different chelating agents to get out, but the younger and smaller that they were damaged with the greater toxicity, sometimes you can't recover them, but a lot of times you can bring them back. Okay, just the biggest thing is don't stop the shooting them. Don't shoot them anymore right now. And you know, there's multiple ways to detox them. We got a couple of videos on it, but stop poisoning them. And omega-3 fatty acids to heal the brain. You got to heal the gut, and you got to detox the blood and the tissue. And this is going to be activated charcoal, juicing and blending, root vegetable juices. They're going to have fungal issues. They're going to have candida issues. They're going to have parasitic issues. I mean, these are sick, sick kids. I know, we get them every week. But today, on a side note, I got this cool little 4-month-old kid. Most darling thing you ever saw. Big old huge eyes. Of course, no vaccines, no vitamin K, no nothing. The mom didn't have any shots. They were educated before they impregnated her. When you see a normal kid, it just warms your soul. It's like, cool, man. When our population might survive some. Yep. Now, next week we're going to talk about ketosis and how to develop to that. That's also a good way to help with toxicity. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I would have one. If I get a shot as a grown-up, how long would the body require to get rid of all the toxin?
It totally depends. There's a neurologist, I think his name's Funderburg, that did a study. If you get 5 flu shots in a row, your risk of neurologic damage has increased 80%, and that's like Alzheimer's dementia. Okay, the flu shot today, since 2013, is grown in different growth mediums. such as monkey kidney cells, dog kidney cells, aborted human fetal cells, and caterpillar larvae. So 3 of those 4 substrates, it's still growing chicken eggs too, but 3 of those 4 are neoplastic cell growth, so those are cancer cells. The shot that I got when I was a kid in the 60s contained the SV40 virus. That's a simian virus number 40. Yeah, I know. There were 39 before that, okay? I don't know. Maybe I got SV38. Okay. SV40 is linked to what my age group has a huge rise in brain cancers and lymphomas. So how long? It's unknown. What damage is it going to have? Unknown. Is that an abnormal exposure for foreign proteins to get into your system? Absolutely. So it's better not. Yeah, it's kind of like I was thinking of shooting myself in the foot with a 45, 38, or 22. You know, a 22 would probably do less damage. What? I shouldn't shoot myself? Okay! God, I hate when people are so logical. No, don't do it. Yes, ma'am.
Are they concerned now that there's going to be an epidemic outbreak now?
No, there will be.
Within the vaccinated groups?
There always is. Always is. I mean, I could run through. I mean, this is like 60-some slides, okay, in a 40-minute talk, which is insane. Insane. I mean, I wanted to put so much stuff in here, like facts and data on polio, facts and data on so many different epidemics that are occurring in vaccinated populations. And I couldn't. There just wasn't enough room. So, but when you look at this, the measles epidemic, you're talking over half of those guys were vaccinated. But you know, the vaccine isn't 100% as safe and effective.
So you're calling 135 people an epidemic?
Kind of, okay. Here's data on pertussis, the DPT shot. It turns out that if you get vaccinated, you're more susceptible to pertussis B. So we're given 6 shots of the DPT in children. Is that creating an epidemic for the other pertussis? Absolutely it is. You know, you're looking at kids suffered from whooping cough, decreased immunity, carriers of the disease. You're looking at this data and you're thinking, that's insane. But then what happens when, and this has been throughout, what happened in the smallpox is they're literally scraping pus out of dead people and cows, and they're putting it in a jar and scratching you and rubbing that in and saying, yes, you're now vaccinated. Massive diseases. You're talking leprosy, you're talking tuberculosis. All of these different diseases were spread by the smallpox. And you know what they say now? Well, the technology just wasn't that good. The vaccines had multiple pathogens in there and we couldn't identify them. Hell, you can't identify them now. You can't isolate a virus. It has to be grown in infected tissue. There's wild viruses and everything there. So the flu shot, it's grown in cancer cells. I don't know, let's do post-marketing surveillance. That's what they're doing. You get a flu shot? Great. What about 10 years from now? Is there going to be a rise in some type of ovarian, uterine, breast, or testicular cancer? Possibly, I don't know. We haven't done a study yet. You're part of it if you're getting a flu shot. This is insane. You know, and it's fear-based, so it's got a psychosis. Well, we have to vaccinate, otherwise chickenpox is going to come back. They couldn't sell the chickenpox vaccine when it first came out because everybody knew it wasn't a big deal. So the chickenpox vaccine first came out, they says, well, mom and dad won't have to take time off from work. So they sold it, everyone started to buy it, it got put on the schedule, then they found out, man, there's a rise in shingles. Yes, sir.
Is there any extra situation or circumstances when you would recommend to some vaccinated or not?
No, because the type of immune stimulus that it does is not accurate. What do we know about antibody production? The only way they measure vaccines, okay, is antibody production. Okay, it doesn't matter. You know, the only way that I would recommend, like, so let's say we're going to Congo, America, malaria-filled environment. Okay, you're going to take vitamin A, you're going to use cinnamon. honey, you're going to use some frankincense oil on you, some peppermint oil, some coconut oil. That's all going to repel the mosquitoes as much as you can. Vitamin C, vitamin D3, omega-3s, and you're going to take care of yourself. You're going to learn how to deep sleep. You're going to change your lifestyle to where you're immune. And I had this discussion with a medical doctor, and he says, no, immune system isn't that. Doc, okay, 100 people walk through a malaria-filled swamp. They all get bitten. Are all of them going to get malaria? Well, no. What's the difference? Well, immune system. Okay. I mean, it's crazy. It's such a dogmatic religion, okay, without science. We got to stop this. And I mean, forget about it. I mean, we only have 8 more years before 1 and 2, but you know what? People are still going to say, it's just better diagnosed. Really, where are the 70-year-old autistics? Okay, it's just a genetic epidemic, which is impossible. Okay, we're going to change the society, and we have to, and we should hold them criminally liable. Okay, I mean, it's literally pick up the pitchforks and march down. And if a doctor isn't getting this, he gets fired. When those doctors get out of patients, they get out of business, then we can change the world. We take over this now. The line is drawn here. You see enough damaged kids, by God, you'll be with me.